Watch the edges of a $100 bill blister and blacken. As the flames consume the paper, the ashes do not fall. They drift upward, reassembling into glowing lines of binary code that map a sprawling digital network across the United States. You are watching an illusion fade. The physical paper in your wallet is already a ghost. The true financial revolution did not happen on Wall Street. It was executed silently inside the chilled server rooms of the central banks. You check your banking app and see a comforting row of digits. That screen is a mathematical trap. You were taught that money is a passive store of value. You are wrong. We have crossed the threshold from dumb money to programmable money. If you ignore this shift, you are walking blindfolded into an era where your life savings can be frozen, restricted, or expired by a single algorithmic trigger. Ignorance of this underlying code guarantees your absolute financial enslavement. I will give you the X-ray vision required to see the invisible rails of this new economy. Together, we will dissect the source code of the ultimate financial weapon. This is not a crude surveillance state. It is a masterpiece of behavioral engineering. I will show you not just how this system intends to control your transactions, but the seductive utopian logic that makes this transition inevitable. The digital cage being built around you is so flawless, you might eventually beg them to lock the door. We pull back from that abstract map and crash into reality. A massive, hyper-cooled data center humming in the high deserts of Utah. Millions of LEDs blink in unison, acting as the heartbeat of a new economic era. Dive with me into the dense bundles of fiber-optic cables beneath the floorboards. Here, financial data packets flow as blinding pulses of pure light, traveling at 186,000 miles per second. This silicon labyrinth is the central nervous system of your future. You were taught a beautifully simple myth in your university economics classes. You were told that money is a tangible medium of exchange. For 3,000 years, that was true. A Roman denarius was a physical token, a bearer asset that you actually held in your hand. If you possessed the object, you possessed the wealth. But your textbooks are dangerously out of date. Today, an astounding 92% of all currency in the global economy exists strictly as intangible database entries. This is not just about using a plastic card to buy your morning coffee. The very ontology of capital has mutated. When 92% of human labor and security is reduced to rows of ones and zeros on a banking ledger, money ceases to be a noun. It becomes a verb. It becomes pure information, entirely dependent on the permission of the private servers that host it. You traded the absolute sovereignty of physical cash for the frictionless convenience of digital networks, and you did it willingly. The banking sector knew that scattered, slow ledgers were no longer enough. They needed a unified nervous system. In July of 2023, while the public was distracted by daily headlines, the United States Federal Reserve quietly rolled out a monumental system called FedNow. In a single stroke, they connected thousands of disparate banks to a 24/7 instant settlement layer. The friction of time and distance was mathematically eradicated from the American banking ecosystem. Consider what instant settlement actually implies. Before this architecture went live, money moved through a cumbersome clearing process. That sluggishness provided a natural buffer against centralization. FedNow shattered that buffer entirely. By accelerating transactions to the speed of light, the Federal Reserve did not just upgrade your banking app. They seized the unprecedented ability to monitor and process the financial metabolism of an entire nation in real time, down to the fraction of a cent. I need you to grasp the sheer scale of this deception. The media sold this to you as a minor software patch, a convenient way to split a dinner bill instantly. But this was not a simple upgrade to your banking interface. What happened in 2023 was the pouring of a new, indestructible digital concrete foundation. It was the quiet installation of the exact prerequisite infrastructure required to launch a fully programmable, centrally managed economy. You do not pour a foundation of that magnitude unless you intend to build a towering fortress on top of it. That fortress is the central bank digital currency. By digitizing the settlement layer, they created a vacuum, ready to be filled with a new iteration of capital. Your current dollars are mere placeholders, waiting to be swapped out for smart contracts. They are preparing to replace a passive medium of exchange with an active software protocol that obeys its programmers, not its owners. When money is rewritten as conditional software, the fundamental physics of wealth completely break down. The rules of private ownership are replaced by the absolute dictates of algorithmic governance. Your purchasing power is about to be tied to real-time compliance matrices, environmental quotas, and automated behavioral scoring. You are standing at the absolute ground zero of a paradigm shift. The concept of financial privacy is being methodically erased from the human experience, code by code. I want you to unlearn everything you have absorbed about the economy. Forget the stock market tickers, forget the interest rate debates on cable news, and forget the paper cash sitting in your wallet. They are a distraction, a magic trick, designed to keep your eyes away from the server racks where the future is being compiled. The true nature of wealth has been irrevocably altered, and the digital trap has already been sprung while we were mesmerized by the convenience of instant transactions. Look closely at the glowing fiber optic cables of the FedNow infrastructure. They are carrying the death warrant of traditional economics. We are about to cross an event horizon from which there is absolutely no return. Your high school textbook confidently told you that money is simply a passive medium of exchange, a neutral tool for trade. That textbook lied to you. Money is no longer an object. Money is now an application programming interface, and you are merely a user in its system. Let us watch that newly compiled application programming interface execute its very first command. At the exact moment those Utah servers went live, a test packet of digital capital surged through the fiber optics. It did not just move, it teleported. We are accustomed to thinking of banking as a physical destination with heavy vault doors, but tomorrow has already arrived. The new protocol bypassed the vault entirely, settling the transaction before a human operator could even blink. Step inside the glass-walled office of a macroeconomic strategist hovering above a silent Wall Street at 3 a.m. To this observer, the terminal screens tell a story of absolute clinical perfection. On the left monitor, we see the ghost of the past, the chaotic, days-long clearing process of an old wire transfer, bogged down by physical paper trails and batch processing. On the right monitor, we see the new reality, a cryptographic settlement executing with millisecond precision. You were programmed to believe that the traditional banking system was a sophisticated marvel of modern capitalism. That official narrative is a myth. The old financial system was essentially a horse-drawn carriage desperately trying to navigate a digital superhighway. To survive the acceleration of the 21st century, we had no choice but to completely digitize the economic engine. The paradox is that, in our rush to upgrade the engine, we completely forgot to ask who holds the keys. Before the deployment of this instant settlement architecture, the sheer friction of moving capital was a catastrophic drag on human progress. Moving your own money across the country routinely took 2 to 3 business days. That delay was not a safety feature. It was a systemic bug. This temporal lag trapped massive amounts of liquidity in the financial plumbing, costing the United States economy billions of dollars annually simply because capital was stuck in transit. Think of that trapped liquidity as economic blood pooling in the extremities, unable to return to the heart. Every hour your transfer spent pending in a clearinghouse was an hour that capital could not be invested, spent, or utilized to generate new wealth. The strategist, looking at those red and green terminal charts, knows that in a high-frequency trading world, a 3-day delay is an eternity. It is an archaic artifact of an era when clerks literally carried ledgers across city streets. The new infrastructure annihilates that friction entirely. It processes complex interbank transfers in under 20 seconds. This is not just a marginal improvement. It is an evolutionary leap in the physics of capital. The system operates 365 days a year, oblivious to weekends and holidays. It completely eliminates the obsolete concept of banking hours. Money no longer sleeps, and it no longer waits for a human signature to authorize its movement. This is the undeniable, seductive allure of absolute efficiency. You wanted frictionless transactions, and the architects of this system gave them to you. The strategist watches the green lines cascade down the right monitor, a beautiful waterfall of uninterrupted global commerce. It feels like a triumph of software engineering. But, counterintuitive as it may seem, this mathematical perfection is exactly where the trap is meticulously set. Efficiency always demands a sacrifice. To achieve this level of frictionless movement, you must fundamentally alter the architecture of trust. You cannot have peer-to-peer anonymity when capital moves at the speed of light. To move money instantly, without catastrophic risk of duplication or fraud, the system requires a single source of absolute truth. The decentralized messiness of cash, where you and I can transact in the shadows, is computationally incompatible with 20-second global settlements. Therefore, this breathtaking efficiency requires absolute, unyielding centralization. The central bank must maintain a godlike view of the unified ledger. It must record every single digital movement, every fraction of a cent in real time. The strategist realizes, with a cold sweat, that the old economic models are suddenly obsolete. We did not just upgrade the wiring. We installed a panopticon directly into the foundational layer of the global financial apparatus. You might ask why you should care if the central bank can see your coffee purchase if it means your paycheck clears faster. That is the fundamental misconception of our time. You are trading the untidy, anonymous freedom of the physical world for the sterile convenience of a digital cage. By demanding a financial system that operates flawlessly and instantly, we willingly surrendered the friction that historically protected our privacy from the overreach of the state. Through the eyes of the strategist in that glass tower, the true nature of this upgrade becomes terrifyingly clear. When a single entity possesses a godlike view of a unified ledger, they do not just observe the economy, they become the economy. The data streaming across those terminal screens is no longer just a record of past transactions. It is a real-time map of human behavior, desires, and political affiliations, all quantified and categorized by an omniscient algorithm. We are hypnotized by the speed, completely ignoring the invisible chains being forged in the background. The elimination of the 2-day clearing period was the bait, and society swallowed it whole. But the engineers in those windowless data centers did not build this godlike ledger just to passively watch you buy groceries. An observation deck of this magnitude is fundamentally designed for control. If they can see every transaction instantly, they can intercept them just as fast. This brings us to a chilling paradox. We digitized the engine to escape the limitations of the physical world, but in doing so, we handed over the very definitions of value and ownership to a centralized authority. The strategist knows that once the central bank has absolute visibility, the very next logical step for any bureaucracy is to begin managing what it sees. Observation is merely the prerequisite for manipulation. The digital dollar is waking up, and it is hungry for instructions. Do not let the sterile beauty of those terminal charts deceive you. We are witnessing the death of financial autonomy, dressed up as a consumer convenience. The real threat is not that the system will fail, but that it will succeed exactly as designed. A unified ledger running at 20 seconds per transaction gives the state the unprecedented ability to intervene in the microscopic details of your daily life. The friction we just eliminated was the only thing keeping you free. So the undeniable efficiency is firmly in place, and the godlike view of the ledger is fully operational. The trap has been flawlessly constructed. Now the architects are preparing to flip the final switch. Because if the central authority can track your money in real time, it is only a matter of code before they start dictating exactly how, when, and where you are permitted to spend it. The era of passive money is officially over. Welcome to the dawn of behavioral economics. Welcome to the dawn of behavioral economics. You are used to a world where money is a mute servant, waiting patiently in your wallet to execute your commands. But tomorrow arrives with a terrifying paradigm shift. If a central authority possesses a godlike view of every financial move you make, it defies all laws of bureaucracy to assume they will not eventually manage exactly what they see. Look down at this bustling, futuristic city street. From up here, the flow of commerce looks perfectly normal. People are tapping their phones for morning coffee, swiping for train tickets, participating in the daily economic dance. But if we strip away the physical illusion and activate our augmented reality overlay, a chilling new layer of reality is exposed. The money itself is literally thinking. Instead of simple numbers decreasing in a digital ledger, we see cascading lines of code executing in real time. We see smart contracts embedded within the very atoms of the digital currency. This forces a deeply uncomfortable paradox upon you. What if your money could suddenly reject your attempt to spend it? Welcome to the unprecedented era of conditional wealth. Your high school textbook is obsolete. The great public misconception is that a central bank digital currency is just a faster version of the digital dollars already sitting in your checking account. That official narrative is a comforting myth. The digits on your current banking app are dumb. They do not know what they are buying. But a central bank digital currency is fundamentally different. It is programmable at the protocol level. I want you to truly understand the sheer intellectual arrogance of this innovation. We are no longer talking about a medium of exchange. We are talking about deploying autonomous software masquerading as legal tender. The friction of the old world has been completely erased, replaced by an elegant mathematical architecture where the currency itself acts as a relentless, invisible enforcer of the law. By integrating advanced cryptographic smart contracts, policymakers bypass the sluggish legislative process entirely. They can now encode political logic directly into the lifeblood of the currency. The money flowing through that futuristic city street is loaded with pre-written instructions, dictating exactly how it can be utilized before it ever leaves the digital vault of the central bank. This means a stimulus dollar can be surgically instructed to only work for specific, state-approved items. It can be coded to clear instantly for groceries or rent, while simultaneously declining transactions for restricted goods. It is a flawless, unarguable system of control. The cashier does not stop you. The police officer does not stop you. The money itself simply refuses to cooperate. Watch the augmented reality overlay as a citizen attempts to purchase an unapproved item. The transaction does not stall due to insufficient funds. The interface flashes red because the internal logic of the dollar has hit a prohibited variable. This counterintuitive reality is the ultimate intellectual hack. You possess the wealth, but you have been entirely stripped of the agency to deploy it. You were programmed to believe that inflation and interest rates were the only levers of macroeconomic control. You were wrong. This technology turns everyday currency into an inescapable behavioral modification tool. It bypasses the conscious mind entirely, shaping societal habits through mathematical constraints rather than public persuasion. It is the ultimate Skinner box, built on a national scale. We are witnessing the ultimate fusion of economic policy and advanced software engineering. The brilliant minds in Silicon Valley and the strategists at the Federal Reserve have essentially merged. They are no longer merely managing the abstract money supply. They are directly engineering human choices at the point of sale. The state is no longer outside of the market. The state is the operating system. From a purely systemic perspective, it is a breathtakingly beautiful achievement. Why spend billions of dollars enforcing compliance with laws when you can just rewrite the physics of the economy so that non-compliance is technologically impossible? It is the most sophisticated paradox of our time. We've created a frictionless utopia that fundamentally costs us our basic financial autonomy. The official narrative insists this is merely a necessary upgrade for the digital age, a way to streamline the chaotic mess of human commerce. But statistics lie, and comfortable explanations are usually traps for the unobservant. Once money ceases to be a passive store of value and becomes an active, programmable agent, the very definition of personal property is quietly rewritten overnight. You look at your phone and think you see wealth, but you are actually looking at a leash. The digital dollar has evolved into a highly responsive organism, one that listens to the central server before it listens to you. We have crossed a threshold where your purchasing power is permanently tethered to your obedience. And as we will soon see, the programming logic only gets more aggressive from here. We leave the sunlit streets and descend into a windowless basement laboratory in Cambridge. Here, the programming logic reaches its terrifying, brilliant apex. Through the eyes of a financial cryptographer, staring at monitors glowing with endless streams of transaction hashes, we see a simulation of a nationwide macroeconomic crisis. This is where conditional wealth scales up to encompass the entire United States economy in a matter of keystrokes. You were taught in macroeconomics that inflation is the great invisible tax, a slow bleed of your purchasing power over decades. But the professor at the chalkboard was teaching you ancient history. Inflation is a crude analog tool. The modern economic architect does not wait for market forces to devalue your money. They simply program your digital dollars to self-destruct on a highly specific, inescapable schedule. Look closely at the cryptographer's terminal. The simulation models a severe recession. Consumer spending has frozen. In the old world, the central bank would lower interest rates, practically begging the public to take out loans and stimulate the market. It was a game of psychological persuasion, hoping you would part with your cash. But the new protocol does not rely on your psychology. It bypasses your free will entirely. The cryptographer runs the execution script. A wave of digital stimulus funds floods into millions of simulated wallets across the nation. But attached to every single digital dollar is a cryptographic smart contract containing a ticking countdown timer. The protocol mandates that these specific funds must be injected back into the economy. They will expire in exactly 30 days. This is a paradigm shift that shatters the very concept of personal property. You look at your banking application and see a balance, but you also see a chronometer rapidly ticking down to zero. The illusion of control is stripped away. The money in your account is no longer a sovereign asset you can choose to hold. It is a hot potato, engineered by brilliant mathematicians to burn your hands if you hold it for too long. Watch the simulation as the 30-day window closes. For the citizens who attempted to save this stimulus, who tried to build a safety net against the crisis, the punishment is swift and automated. At midnight, the smart contract triggers a hard-coded burn function. The unspent digital dollars are not taxed. They are mathematically annihilated. They simply vanish from the unified ledger without a trace. It is a beautiful, terrifying display of absolute systemic efficiency. The cryptographer feels a cold thrill of discovery, mixed with a creeping existential dread at the sheer elegance of this control mechanism. There are no repo men, no collection agencies, no bureaucratic friction. Just the silent, flawless execution of code. The state dictates the exact velocity of money, and the mathematics ensure absolute compliance. By weaponizing time itself, the central bank completely eliminates the macroeconomic concept of hoarding. You were programmed to believe that saving money is a virtue, the foundation of individual financial security. But to the algorithmic ledger, your savings account is a glitch. It is trapped liquidity that threatens the system. The new architecture forces the velocity of money to an unnatural, hyper-efficient maximum. We are looking at a visionary utopia for the macroeconomic strategist, but a dystopia for the individual citizen. This automated burn function mathematically prevents the kind of economic stagnation that caused the Great Depression. The code guarantees that commerce will flow, that businesses will have revenue, and that the financial heart of the nation will never stop beating. The economy is saved, but at a profound cost. The price of this perfect, frictionless stability is the permanent destruction of your fundamental right to save for the future. You are trading the ability to build generational wealth for the guarantee of a perpetually stimulated market. The cryptographer stares at the glowing hashes, realizing that time preference, the choice between consuming today or investing for tomorrow, has been stolen from the individual and given to the machine. Your high school textbooks lied to you about what money is supposed to be. They told you it was a reliable store of value. But under this new protocol, value is entirely conditional. It is a temporary permit granted by the central network, valid only as long as your behavior aligns with the current monetary policy. If the state needs you to buy goods, your money will literally degrade until you comply with their algorithm. And do not succumb to the misconception that this power will only be used during severe economic collapses. Once the infrastructure for expiring currency is perfectly integrated into the digital dollar, the temptation to use it will be irresistible. It becomes a surgical tool to manipulate localized markets, stimulate specific industries, or penalize demographics that the algorithmic consensus deems insufficiently productive. Deep in the windowless laboratory, the simulation concludes. The virtual economy has been successfully stimulated. The charts turn green. The mathematical models declare a flawless victory over the recession. But the cryptographer is left staring at the horrifying cost of this triumph. The citizens in the simulation survived the crash, but they emerged completely stripped of their financial autonomy. They own nothing but the present moment. We have reverse-engineered the ultimate financial weapon. It is not a tax code passed by politicians, and it is not a physical vault guarded by soldiers. It is a few lines of elegant, unyielding cryptography that rewrite the fundamental laws of human commerce. We are witnessing the birth of an economy where human psychology is no longer a variable, because the currency itself enforces the required outcome with ruthless precision. You are looking at the end of the sovereign individual. When the central bank can attach a self-destruct sequence to the fruits of your labor, you are no longer a participant in a free market. You are a biological node in a giant automated machine. And as this terrifyingly brilliant code moves from the simulation phase to the live network, it sets the stage for an even more intimate invasion of your daily existence. That intimate invasion of your daily existence is already rolling out. We are used to money being a blind tool, a silent witness to our choices. But tomorrow arrives with a radically different paradigm. Once you accept that currency can be programmed to expire, you must logically accept that it can be programmed to judge. The transition from an economic simulation to a lived reality is happening right now, inside the algorithms that track your digital footprint. Look closely at the data stream connecting a modern digital wallet to a user profile. It is a dizzying zoom into a carbon footprint tracker, updating in real time with every swipe and click. This is not a distant, theoretical dystopia. This is the architecture of the new programmable dollar. When every cent you spend is a line of conditional code, your personal morality mathematically transforms into a variable within the national economic formula. You were taught that capitalism was a morally neutral system. You exchange labor for capital, and you spend that capital however you see fit. That official narrative is a dangerous myth in the era of smart contracts. What happens when your digital ledger is inextricably linked to your environmental and social identity? The state no longer needs to pass complex legislation or levy heavy carbon taxes to change your behavior. They simply patch the software. By linking digital identity platforms directly to the central bank's unified ledger, algorithms can automatically restrict purchasing power based on personal quotas. Your financial profile merges perfectly with your behavioral score. It is a stunning, terrifyingly elegant feat of data engineering. The system cross-references your grocery receipts, your utility bills, and your travel history, compiling a dynamic risk assessment that dictates what your money can buy. Watch the user in our data stream attempt to purchase a standard commercial plane ticket. The interface processes the request, routing the payment through the unified ledger. But the transaction suddenly flashes red. The screen displays a cold, unyielding message. Carbon limit exceeded. Payment denied. The money sits perfectly intact within the wallet, but the protocol refuses to execute the transfer. The code has walled off a physical section of reality. This is the counterintuitive genius of the new system. If an environmental protocol dictates a maximum personal carbon allowance for the month, the smart contract embedded in your digital dollar activates a localized freeze. It will automatically lock out purchases of gasoline, commercial air travel, or even high-emission agricultural products the millisecond you hit your algorithmic limit. The currency itself becomes the ultimate, inescapable regulator.
You might think you can find a workaround, a black market, or a bureaucratic loophole. You are profoundly wrong. We are dealing with cryptographic enforcement, not human oversight. The ledger does not care about your personal emergencies, your urgent business meetings, or your political beliefs. It simply reads the logic gate. If the quota is exceeded, then decline the transaction. It is a flawless, frictionless execution of policy at the protocol level. This is the moment the illusion of your financial autonomy shatters completely. We have built a machine that converts state ideology into inescapable mathematics. If this scale of algorithmic control blows your mind too, hit the like button and subscribe. Do you think humanity stood a chance against this level of technological perfection? Let me know in the comments, because understanding this architecture is your only defense against it. When the red error message flashes across your screen, there is no human manager to argue with. There is no customer service department to call, and no supervisor to override the system. It is pure, frictionless, mathematical denial. The bureaucracy of the past, with its slow courts and inefficient regulators, has been replaced by a silent, instantaneous judgment rendered by a decentralized network of servers. You are arguing with a calculator. The scope of this active code is not limited to just your carbon footprint. Once the behavioral parameters are established, any social metric can be plugged into the smart contract. A healthcare algorithm could theoretically restrict your ability to purchase alcohol or processed sugar if your medical data indicates a high risk of illness. The digital dollar becomes a personalized dietary enforcer, optimizing the population's biological efficiency. This is a paradigm shift so massive that classical economists are entirely unequipped to model it. We are moving from a society governed by laws to a society governed by code. Laws are broken and then punished after the fact. Code prevents the infraction from occurring in the first place. The digital fence is invisible until you bump into it, at which point the algorithmic boundary hardens into an impenetrable wall of rejected hashes. Look again at the stranded traveler staring at the denied payment screen. They have the funds. They have the desire to travel, but they lack the necessary algorithmic permission to participate in that specific slice of the economy. The money in their pocket is entirely conditional, an illusion of wealth that only functions when their behavior aligns perfectly with the hyper-optimized goals of the central network. We have engineered a frictionless utopia where non-compliance is physically impossible. You are forced to be a good citizen because the medium of exchange refuses to facilitate anything else. But this localized restriction, the inability to buy a flight or a tank of gas, is merely a gentle warning. It is a minor inconvenience compared to the true, apocalyptic power of a unified ledger when it decides to turn the dial all the way to absolute zero. The dial hitting absolute zero does not look like a dramatic bank run or a stock market crash. Through the eyes of the macroeconomic strategist, it looks like a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning. A local business owner sits down with a coffee, opens their laptop, and types in their credentials. The screen hesitates. Then, the interface goes dark, replaced by a cold, sterile error message. 404. Account not found. The strategist watches the data flow and understands the chilling reality of that error code.
The business owner's money has not been stolen, nor has the bank collapsed. The digital dollars are sitting precisely where they were a millisecond ago on the unified ledger. But the individual's cryptographic handshake has been violently severed. They have just become a ghost in the physical world, locked out of the financial biosphere entirely.
You were taught in history class that exile requires geography. The Romans sent you to an island. The Soviets put you on a train to Siberia. That is a primitive misconception. In a truly programmable society, we do not need to physically relocate you to remove you from civilization. Exile is no longer a matter of distance. It is a matter of database access. You are banished by the simple flip of a binary switch. To grasp the sheer gravity of this, you must understand the architectural difference between the cash you used to hold and the code you now use. Physical cash is a peer-to-peer bearer asset. It is inherently permissionless. When you hand a $20 bill to a vendor, the transaction requires zero external validation. But the programmable ledger operates on a fundamentally opposite philosophy: the default deny architecture. A default deny system means that every single transaction is forbidden until the algorithm explicitly grants permission. The money does not belong to you. It is a conditional token that constantly asks the master server for authorization to move. You are essentially requesting a micro visa every time you buy a sandwich, and the criteria for that approval are no longer just about having sufficient funds in your digital wallet. The macroeconomic strategist monitors the back end of this compliance system, watching the predictive risk algorithms patrol the network. These are not human bankers reviewing your file. They are autonomous machine learning models analyzing your social proximity, your recent metadata, and your behavioral scores. If the algorithm flags a deviation from accepted parameters, your wallet is frozen globally in less than 1/10 of a second. There is no formal indictment, no day in court, and no physical police officer knocking on your door. The punitive action travels at the speed of light. Because the central bank digital currency ledger is unified, that freeze is instantly propagated across every point of sale, every transit terminal, and every online gateway. You are suddenly holding a cryptographic key that unlocks absolutely nothing. In the past, if a local bank froze your checking account, you simply walked across the street to a competitor with the cash under your mattress. But in a fully digitized ecosystem, there are no alternative rails. Algorithmic debanking amounts to total economic paralysis. You cannot buy groceries to feed your family. You cannot pay your monthly rent. You cannot even hire a lawyer to fight the algorithmic judgment. This is the paradox of our ultimate technological achievement. We built an incredibly frictionless network, but the friction we eliminated was actually human freedom. By removing the physical analog layer, we made the individual entirely dependent on the digital umbilical cord. Cut that cord, and you are mathematically erased from society. You still breathe, you still walk, but economically, you have ceased to exist. You might be thinking that this is a problem exclusively for criminals, terrorists, and dissidents. That is a dangerous, naive comfort. The parameters of risk are not static. They are dynamically updated by the state. What constitutes a high-risk behavior today is radically different from what it will be 5 years from now. When the code is centralized, compliance is a moving target that you cannot afford to miss. The macroeconomic strategist knows that we are witnessing the final death of private property. For centuries, wealth was a defensive wall that protected the individual from the overreach of the collective.
But when the state controls the very physics of how value transfers from one node to another, that wall evaporates. Your savings are no longer a shield. They are a leash, held firmly by a machine you cannot see. Human bureaucracy was flawed, corrupt, and agonizingly slow. But its very inefficiency was the breathing room where liberty survived. A corrupt official could be bribed, a sympathetic judge could show mercy, a paper file could be lost in a dusty archive. The new digital dollar eliminates all of those human vulnerabilities. It replaces them with a flawless sociopathic code that never sleeps and never forgives. You have to ask yourself why we would ever willingly step into this digital cage. The answer is the most uncomfortable truth of all, because the cage is incredibly beautiful. We did not build this infrastructure purely out of a desire for authoritarian control. We built it to solve the massive, systemic failures of the 20th century. We traded our autonomy for the promise of a perfectly managed world. Think about a world where tax evasion is mathematically impossible, meaning public infrastructure is fully funded overnight. Consider a ledger so precise that organized crime cannot launder a single cent without triggering an immediate, automated network quarantine. The same default deny architecture that terrifies the privacy advocate is the exact same tool that promises to eradicate systemic financial corruption forever. The strategist looking down at the silent, digitized streets knows the ultimate paradox. This supreme network of control was not designed by a dictator plotting in the shadows. It was engineered by brilliant visionaries attempting to mathematically cure poverty, stabilize markets, and optimize human civilization. The terrifying question is not whether the system works, but what happens when it works exactly as intended. You are conditioned to view this ultimate paradox as a dystopian nightmare, but you are looking through the wrong lens. We left the macroeconomic strategist staring into the abyss of algorithmic exile, terrified by the ruthless efficiency of default deny architecture. But to truly understand the trap, you must step out of the shadows and walk with me into the light. The most terrifying aspect of this frictionless society is its undeniable, breathtaking beauty. We are used to the chaotic, bleeding reality of the free market, but tomorrow arrives as a perfectly orchestrated mathematical symphony. The pristine, futuristic cityscape before you operates in absolute serenity. There is no poverty here, no panhandlers begging for physical coins that no longer exist. Automated drones deliver goods in a flawlessly optimized airspace, guided by the very same network that manages every digital cent. Your high school history classes programmed you to expect an authoritarian dictator pulling the strings from a smoky room. You need to abandon that misconception right now. Do not mistake this architecture for malice. This machine was built to cure the world of poverty, and the intellectual horror of our situation is that it might actually work. The engineers of this system did not set out to enslave you. The architects of this centralized ledger are not comic book villains. They are brilliant, pragmatic engineers trying to solve the chaotic, bloody history of human economics. They looked back at centuries of bank runs, hyperinflation, and engineered depressions, and they correctly identified the core vulnerability. The flaw was never the resources. The flaw was the unpredictable, irrational nature of human behavior. You were taught that the boom and bust cycle is a natural economic rhythm, like the changing of the seasons. That is a comforting myth told to victims of a broken system. To the software engineer, a market crash is just a massive, unpatched bug in the code of civilization. Millions of lives ruined because of a fractional reserve error and emotional panic. They decided to patch that vulnerability permanently. When the central bank controls the very protocol of value, the entire concept of a welfare state is transformed from a political argument into a self-executing script. A fully programmable digital dollar allows for a flawless implementation of universal basic income. Within this utopian metropolis, millions of citizens are seamlessly receiving their digital stipends at the exact same microsecond. There are no missing checks, no bureaucratic delays, and no grifters gaming the system. Targeted micro-subsidies drop directly into the digital wallets of those who mathematically qualify, precisely at the microsecond they need them. The smart contract verifies your status, cross-references your employment data, and executes the transfer without a single human administrator ever touching the file. And the other side of the fiscal equation is just as brutally perfect. You are witnessing the absolute eradication of tax evasion. When every single transaction is permanently logged on a unified, state-controlled ledger, the shadow economy simply ceases to exist. You cannot hide income when the money itself is programmed to automatically route 20% of every transfer directly to the Treasury. The paradox here is staggering. The exact same surveillance mechanism that tracks your carbon footprint is what fully funds the public infrastructure overnight. We are trading the messy, anonymous freedom of the analog era for a perfectly balanced society. This is where classical economics takes its final breath, and pure, unadulterated mathematics takes the throne to rule the markets. By utilizing artificial intelligence to balance the ledger in real time, we are rewriting the fundamental laws of financial gravity. You grew up believing inflation is an unstoppable force of nature, a necessary evil of growth. The truth is, inflation is just a lagging indicator of a blind central bank reacting too slowly to outdated data. The new digital dollar is entirely self-aware. The artificial intelligence managing this network sees every dollar, every fraction of a cent, moving across the country at the speed of light. It anticipates supply chain shocks before a cargo ship even leaves the port. With this godlike perspective, we could mathematically eliminate inflation and boom and bust cycles forever, creating an era of unprecedented systemic stability. Think about the sheer scale of that achievement. We are talking about engineering a society where your savings cannot be silently diluted by reckless government printing, because the money supply dynamically adjusts itself to perfectly match economic output. No more engineered recessions, no more panicked sell-offs, just a smooth, continuous upward trajectory managed by cold logic. I need you to grasp the seductive power of this vision. You're being asked to surrender your financial privacy, to hand over the keys to your economic autonomy. But in exchange, the architects are offering to mathematically guarantee that no child ever goes hungry, that no hospital is ever underfunded, and that the devastating financial crises of the 20th century never happen again. It is the ultimate philosophical trap. We have finally built a machine that can save us from our own greed, our own corruption, and our own incompetence. The smart contract is entirely incorruptible. It does not take bribes. It does not play political favorites. It simply executes the optimal allocation of resources to keep human civilization running at maximum efficiency. As you look down at this pristine, beautifully sterile digital utopia, the true cost of our evolution becomes agonizingly clear. We did not stumble into this programmable cage by accident. We sprinted into it, hypnotized by the mathematical promise of perfection. The algorithm has finally cured the world of poverty, and the only thing it cost us was the fundamental right to exist on our own terms. The cryptographic fire has burned out. The ashes of our analog past are swept away by a cold, metallic wind, leaving nothing but a sterile, blinking cursor on a blank, digital interface. We stared at the promise of a mathematically flawless society, and we willingly handed over the keys. The transition from physical paper to programmable protocol is officially complete, and the architects of this system have quietly left the laboratory. For the past hour, I have shown you the invisible architecture of this new reality. We traced the evolution of wealth from massive server farms to the silent execution of smart contracts dictating your daily choices. I need you to understand that this is not a speculative theory. The foundational code for this programmable ledger has already been deployed and rigorously tested across the global banking sector. Classical economics has been permanently replaced by absolute algorithmic logic. We began this journey with a profound illusion. The belief that money was a passive medium of exchange, a completely neutral tool resting in your physical wallet. That was the foundational axiom of the old world. Today, that illusion has been definitively dispelled. You have witnessed how currency was quietly re-engineered into an application programming interface, a dynamic communication protocol that no longer just measures your wealth, but actively and preemptively manages your behavior. Humanity has made a definitive choice. We traded the messy, anonymous, and fundamentally chaotic freedom of physical cash for a perfectly orchestrated, algorithmically enforced utopia. The friction of the analog economy, those agonizing delays and inefficiencies, was actually the exact space where human liberty existed. When we mathematically eliminated that friction to achieve instant settlement times, we simultaneously erased the financial privacy that protected the individual from the state. The true genius of this architecture lies in its complete invisibility. A modern central bank does not need to deploy physical force to guarantee compliance. They simply rewrite the active smart contract. We explored how stimulus funds are now programmed with a 30-day self-destruct sequence, mathematically annihilating your right to save. We saw how a simple environmental variable change triggers a frictionless denial of service. The control is absolute, instantaneous, and entirely automatic. This brings us to the most terrifying lesson of our curriculum. In a default deny digital ledger, exile is no longer a physical banishment. It is a swift, mathematical deletion. If an automated risk algorithm flags your behavior, your access to survival is frozen globally in less than 1/10 of a second. You are not robbed. You are simply disconnected from the lifeblood of civilization. This is the ultimate weapon of this century, the power to computationally erase a human being from society. I offer you this final intellectual challenge, the perspective you must carry forward. We are standing at the exact event horizon of economic history. The debate before us is no longer about accepting or rejecting a new payment technology. It is a fundamental question about what it actually means to be a free individual. When every single transaction is monitored, evaluated, and conditionally permitted by a central algorithm, the very concept of free will becomes just another managed data point. Do not make the mistake of thinking this system was born purely out of malice. That is a lazy intellectual shortcut. This machine was engineered by brilliant minds attempting to permanently solve the chaotic, tragic history of human economics. They offered us the mathematical eradication of poverty, the end of inflation, and the flawless distribution of universal basic income. The trap was beautifully designed. We willingly walked into the digital cage because the bars were made of guaranteed security. Take a hard look at the numbers on your screen right now. Let this new axiom sink in. In this programmable reality, wealth is no longer something you possess. The era of the independent bearer asset is entirely dead. Your digital dollars are merely a temporary privilege granted by a machine, completely conditional upon your continuous compliance with its underlying code. You are no longer an owner of capital. You are simply a permitted user, existing at the mercy of network administrators. The new financial architecture is fully operational. Thousands of banks are permanently connected. The artificial intelligence is actively processing the global ledger, and the behavioral smart contracts are quietly waiting for their activation triggers. We have built a world where economic policy bypasses the legislature and directly alters human behavior at the protocol level. The physical dollar bill in your pocket is just a fading souvenir from a time when your decisions were actually your own. What lies directly ahead is an era of unprecedented systemic stability. But it is a stability achieved by completely anesthetizing the human spirit. We are entering a frictionless utopian nightmare where dissent is automatically defunded and compliance is instantly rewarded. The central algorithm will feed you, shelter you, and predict your needs with terrifying accuracy, provided you never step outside the strict mathematical boundaries it has set for your life. The illusion of control is shattering. If this investigation has successfully shattered your outdated economic models, hit the like button to confirm we are breaking through the cognitive dissonance. I want you to document your verdict on this programmable future in the comments below, because voicing our human perspective is the first step in resisting algorithmic silence. And make sure you subscribe to this channel, not just to watch another documentary, but to actively continue this critical research with us. The syllabus is far from over. The era of financial privacy is over. We have crossed the threshold into a reality where freedom is conditionally leased, and every single transaction is a silent confession to a machine that never sleeps. Now you know the absolute truth behind the digital dollar. Live with it, adapt to the new code, and never forget that true autonomy is a dying art. Welcome to the programmed future. Class dismissed.